Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Powered Hormones podcast. I'm your host, Sheridan Decker, and I'm super excited to have you here with me today chatting all things probiotics. Now, it's probably one of the most debated topics when it comes to IBS because IBS is such a general term, and I use the word to get your attention, but I don't believe in it. That's probably almost completely true. I use the term IBS because it's what your GP is telling you. So, when you're struggling with gut issues, often your GP will turn to you and say, "Hey, we don't really know what's going on." And they say, "You've got IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome. Basically, your constipation, your loose stools doesn't really have a root cause. Here's some tools to manage it, but we don't know how we're actually going to fix it." So it's a really general term to describe the symptoms you're experiencing. Now, everyone who's followed me, who's listened to my podcast before, who's followed me on Instagram, who's been to a workshop, who's chatted to me will know that I think there's a root cause for IBS. In fact, I know there's a root cause for your IBS. And it's something I see in clinic day in, day out is women come in and they're like, "Hey, I've got all these gut symptoms. I don't know what's going on. The GP says it's IBS. We run this testing and we actually find gut dysbiosis, inflammation, parasites, good bacteria, nasty bacteria, and we can actually deal with the roots of it rather than just addressing your symptoms." So, for those who don't know me, I'm Sheridan Decker. Welcome to my podcast. Today, we're chatting about probiotics for the IBS females, specifically the health conscious active female who is already trying to improve her gut health and has been either prescribed probiotics by somebody or has just walked into a chemist and is like, "Hey, I need something to help my gut. What should I be taking?" Now, like I said, this is such a controversial topic in my world because all the marketing information on probiotics for IBS is targeting general gut issues. So, no specific testing has been done because if you had done specific testing, you would not be going looking for a probiotic that's targeting IBS or even one that's targeting constipation or loose stools. You'd actually be looking for strains instead. You'd be looking for more specific things rather than a general probiotic or a general supplement for that matter. So, the way probiotics work in people with IBS, women with IBS, is that what we know from IBS picture and from the thousands of stool tests I've run, but also if you check the research, it's the same thing. The microbiome is abnormal in people with IBS. So the idea and the research, when it's done on women with IBS, let's say there's 10 women with IBS, so irritable bowel syndrome, there's been no diagnosis, like there's no SIBO, there's no this, that, not because it's not in there, but you really need to understand this because the testing hasn't been done. So you have a group of women who have not run any functional testing who've been labeled with IBS. Now, in the general testing, so in a general kind of GP stool test, they can see that there is some abnormality in the microbiome. These probiotics work by replacing missing strains of beneficial bacteria. So the most common thing they see across the board is that you're low in the bifidobacterium and the lactobacillus strains. Okay. This is going to obviously rebuild the good guys, but also what we call crowding out some of those unfavorable strains. Okay. So when we can crowd those strains out, what we can actually do is the few things that are going to change a symptom picture, which is alter the fermentation patterns. So, for anyone who has followed a low FODMAP diet, you will understand the fermentation that can come from food. So, you eat certain things, it ferments in your gut, and that's what gives you symptoms. The other thing is beneficial bacteria can change your gut motility, so how things move through your intestine. Slow gut motility will obviously ferment more because it's moving slower, but also we can see damage to that migrating motor complex and ways that are going to give you constipation because of how slow things will move through your GI tract. We're also looking at improving the gut epithelial barrier, so preventing harmful organisms from entering the body. So basically, when you're thinking about that leaky gut lining, if you were to Google that, you would see how that beneficial bacteria is actually sitting above the cells and protecting things from getting into the body. They also work by reducing visceral hypersensitivity, so that sensitivity to gut pain, and changing the anxious behaviors and the brain activity in IBS via the gut brain axis. So we know that a lot of those serotonin and dopamine neurotransmitters are modulated in the gut, and beneficial bacteria will help that as well. So, as a general rule, that's what the research is showing us. Probiotics restore beneficial bacteria because they're not herbs, so they're not treating anything. They're restoring those lost species, which are going to in turn reduce your pain, give you regular bowel movements, stop loose stools, reduce gas, bloating, fermentation, and those symptoms. But this is too general because you're still playing a guessing game. In some people, that works really great. If, let's just say, you've run a microbiome test and you're just low in Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus, you can 100% go in with these beneficial species and also prebiotics to start feeding and building the Bifidobacterium and the Lactobacillus back up into range. Now, in a lot of IBS cases that I see, there's actually overgrowths in there. So we might see this up in a small intestinal overgrowth, or we might see overgrowths in the large intestine. If we just go in and start throwing in prebiotics and probiotics, you're actually going to make that symptom picture worse. So, the logic behind it, it can't just be just add more bacteria and hope for the best. All right. We need to use targeted strains that are actually going to restore the commensal bacterial populations that we want. We want to reinforce the intestinal barrier. We want to modulate immune responses. And we also want to normalize gut motility signaling. So there's a few different things going in there when we're talking about probiotic strains and what we're trying to do with them. But also, we may need to treat first. And that is the key thing from this episode, is that your probiotic is not the first line of treatment for quote unquote IBS or any gut dysfunction. It is testing, then we may need to treat, and then we can start adding in more of these strains because a broad multi strain probiotic generally does more harm than good. And this is why I want to touch on as well. What do you actually look for in a probiotic if you have IBS? Because, like I said, you can't just go the broadest possible or most diverse strain. That's not actually what you're looking for. You need to know what species, like what lactobacillus, what bifidobacterium species, or what bacillus strains, so our spore-based ones, are really, really beneficial for you, again, given your gut microbiome picture. What is the CFU count in them? So this varies between different probiotic strains, as in how much is in there, and then also what's the trials and the research done on it. Am I actually getting enough out of my probiotic? Because this is the key difference between getting a practitioner grade one and just a general one from the chemist or even the supermarket, will be the strength of the probiotic. And then also looking for gut disruptive fillers. But a lot of these commercial ones have fillers in probiotics and supplements. And we know that sometimes this can obviously impact your gut. And if you handle them, like I've seen two same strains of probiotics, both from different companies, and my clients could not handle one company, but they could handle the other one because of the fillers in it and also the way it was made, basically. So you're looking at capsules, you're looking at fillers, you're looking at what else is in there, and are they, interacting with the intestinal barrier, because that is super common as well. And then also you really need to understand how long is someone staying on this probiotic as well, because you want to be sort of minimum 4 to 12 weeks, and it can take up to that time for the probiotic to kick in. Some people, it's like overnight. Like you take it and it's working the next day. And if you stop it, you get your symptoms back. But for a microbiome to genuinely shift, and this is why I don't retest a gut microbiome under 12 weeks normally. SIBO testing is different, but a gut microbiome, because it can take that long to shift things. So, what you actually want to know, what are the best strains for IBS in general? So, I'm going to preface this with saying this is not SIBO specific. So, if you have tested and you've got a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, this is not the podcast episode for you. Go listen to one of the SIBO ones. These are the general guidelines. If either you've done a large intestinal stool test and there's no overgrowths, but you still got IBS like symptoms, or like I said, if you're going to wing it for a bit, not recommended, but you can do that. These are the strains I would be looking for personally, and I would be matching your strain with your symptom with the evidence. Okay, so these strains have the strongest research across different IBS subtypes. So, for example, for bloating, abdominal pain, and overall symptom reduction. So, reducing visceral hypersensitivity and low grade inflammation. We're looking for Bifidobacterium longan. Okay, so this bacterial strain, and this is what I mean strain specific, is really important. This one will work really, really well on these symptoms. For constipation, slow gut transit time, this my favorite strain is the Bifidobacterium lactis, so HNO19. This will help improve stool frequency and motility. Okay, one of my favorite brands to use. So this one is super easy to get your hands on. It's a Life Extension Flora Assist probiotic. So you can just get it off iHerb, I think that one is. And that will help give you those regular bowels, because that strain works specifically on that transit time. The most common one I use in clinic is Lactobacillus plantarum 299V. So this bacterial strain works on pain, bloating, and like we said, very general IBS symptoms, but it enhances that gut barrier function and it reduces gas production, which is super important if you are fermenting food in your gut, which most women with IBS are. The brand I use is the Ultraflora IBS Soothe probiotic. So that's by Metagenics. But anyone that is A, like I said, has no additives, B, has that singular strain, you're looking for the Lactobacillus plantarum 299V. Very readily and available because there is so much research on that strain. The other one that's really, really popular is Saccharomyces boulardii. So this is actually always prescribed for urgencies, loose stool, post barley belly, and it helps normalize those bowel movements and regulate inflammation. If you have, or if you are more constipation dominant, I'd be really careful with it and trial and test it, because it can slow down or stop IBSD, so diarrhea. Sometimes it can feed into the constipation picture a little bit. I love the Flora Active SB, and that's one that I always tell my clients to take if they're going to Bali and they're worried about getting barley belly, or if they do just struggle with loose stools. Another really great brand from a company I love, which is the Mega Microbiome Company. So they have like Mega Mucosa, Mega IgG, Mega Spore. So they've got the Mega Spore as a singular spore based probiotic, which I absolutely love if you've got gut infections and you can't handle the lactobacillus or bifidobacterium. So if you're struggling with a strain based one, this is the way to go. You could do Megasport, or you could do their Restore Flora. So that's a probiotic that contains 3 well-studied and researched strains. So it's got the Saccharomyces boulardii, the Bacillus subtilis and the Bacillus clausii. I'm going to say that wrong. But this combination of probiotic yeast and probiotic bacteria does give you a really nice digestive support in there. And then the last option really, which I don't recommend for IBS clients, is anything multi-strained. Okay, so you need to have cleared your gut infections. You need to have introduced these beneficial singular strain species before. See how your gut's handling it. Added in your prebiotics, then you can start playing with multi-strains. So your lactobacillus and bifidobacterium combinations. These are going to work in a broad kind of mixed IBS picture because they work on multiple aspects, but it is not specific. And usually the CFU count is not high enough to make really substantial changes unless you're doing the prebiotics as well and you're definitely taking them regularly, but you've also done all the other work. Because like I said, if you react to probiotics or you've got SIBO or overgrowth in the gut, any broad strain things is going to make it significantly worse. Or if you do these and you start taking prebiotics like inulin, phos, GOS on top of it, you're just going to feed the infections as well. So you want to use these as a guide, but ultimately you want to run comprehensive microbiome testing, SIBO testing, rule out what's going on, treat the infections, then add the probiotics back in because they are so beneficial and they are so needed. And they also stop things like thrush, yeast overgrowth, candida. They help with a lot of skin issues. They help, like I said, with mood, with anxiety, depression. That I find if my gut's really good, my training's really good, they help with digestion, absorption of nutrients. So there's so many benefits to having those good bacteria in there. And it's really hard. Like a lot of women say, hey, can't I just get it through my diet, like kimchi, kombucha, yogurt? And you can get strains from that, but you're not going to get the specific strains you need at the dosage. They're really good for long term gut health, not for restoring an IBS type picture. So it's the second step, not the first step. If you're getting worse on probiotics, please test. Otherwise, play around with some of these strains, the HN019 if you got the constipation, the plantarum if you just have a lot of pain, bloating, the Saccharomyces boulardii if you got loose stools, and start to work out what's helping your gut. Like I said, if you've tested, please. I hope that was helpful. If you have questions around this, please reach out on Instagram, Sheridan_functional nutrition, and also look into booking a gut health call with me so that we can chat about testing options and go, okay, what probiotics have you tried? What prebiotics have you tried? And what testing have you done? Because 9 times out of 10, women who are coming to me have spent thousands and thousands and thousands on testing. On supplements, but they have not done any testing. So we need to do that testing piece first, then go in, clear the infections with your herbal antimicrobials, and then we can go in with these probiotics and have some more fun. I hope that was helpful. Please reach out. I'd love to hear from you, and I will see you next time.